I'm Mark Fisher. I'm in the Department of Philosophy, where I serve as the Director for Teaching and Learning with Technology and Philosophy. The project that I'm working on is an attempt to adapt and modify the existing Teaching with Technology certificate in order to, on the one hand, make it more attractive to graduate students in the philosophy department, and on the other hand, make it more directly suited to the particular kinds of skills and abilities that we're looking for, looking to help graduate students develop in the philosophy department.
So, can you give an example of some of those skills? What are some of those skills?
Well, we're since it's teaching and teaching with technology, we're concentrating primarily on integrating a recognition of the importance of digital tools for both learning and practicing teaching. And so, for instance, we would like our students to be cognizant of the fact that the blackboard or the whiteboard is just as much technology as PowerPoint or Prezi or some other kind of format, and that it's really about making decisions about which existing technologies are best suited to delivering content or to engaging students or interacting with students in the way that's most appropriate for the course objectives. And so we think it would be good for students to, especially as they're learning to teach and as they're being mentored by senior faculty, to experiment with things like presenting in PowerPoint or presenting similar material in Prezi and seeing what differences those present. We also think that one of the things that we want to focus on is not just sort of the first level of teaching using technology, but the second level of reflecting on their own use of technology and of encouraging their students to develop the same kinds of capacities with technology for use in their schoolwork, in their research, term papers, outside projects, etc., that they themselves are developing, so that they're helping their students to develop the same kinds of digital literacies that they're developing with respect to working, broadly speaking, in philosophy.
Yeah, that reflection piece is often forgotten, right? But it's a key part of any kind of learning that any kind of learning you're involved in.
Right.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And a lot of people, especially in the ed tech space, especially I know I did this when I first started in the space, is the technology came before your objective or your pedagogy.
Right.
And then over time, you realize that that's backwards. And you should
Right.
start, like you mentioned, what are your objectives that you're trying to get across, and then let's figure out what that technology matches. What you're doing.
Right. And presumably, newer graduate students are going to have different levels of familiarity, different levels of comfort with various technologies that we confronted first as things that present themselves as new technologies, whereas they are much more likely to already be involved in social media, to already being producing multimedia and sharing it with friends. And so in a lot of cases, I think as the program continues, the students who come in are going to be sort of more and more in a position just to be thinking about, to have some of these skills sort of in the background as they're thinking about their pedagogy. And the pedagogy can come first, and they can recognize that there are things that they're already doing that can help them more effectively reach their students and connect with their students. Because of course, the students themselves are moving in these directions as well, though not always, it seems, in the same kinds of ways that we might anticipate sort of reflectively when we're using technologies that we came at originally from a standpoint of questions about how to use them in our research or our teaching. And so that's
Oh yeah, my colleague at IST. And IST is a place that they spent a lot of time early on looking at, privacy on the internet and all these other
Right,
kind of things.
right.
And this guy is an IST PhD student, graduated, and his motto was "Privacy's dead." And he said we think about it, but the students coming up now and the students coming up in the future, as long as whatever data they have out there that is being used in a helpful way, think Amazon, think places like that.
Yeah.
It's like it's not even a thought is given to that, the privacy angle of these kind of things.
Yeah, we had a workshop with someone who was working with someone from the Harvard graduate school who's working on Kerry James, who's working on new media and student use, and we discussed privacy fairly extensively, and it seemed like it's an open question whether privacy is dead or whether sort of the reigning assumptions have changed so much that it doesn't match up with what we're used to thinking of, but that there are still some sort of implicit presuppositions, maybe not necessarily about open versus closed or completely shut down versus completely open, but levels of control or those sorts of things. So clearly privacy is in many ways a socially situated phenomena or concept that changes as people's expectations and understandings change. But that itself actually presents some pretty interesting philosophical questions.
Yeah, there certainly seems to be
rights and obligations.
Yeah, there certainly seems to be some generational differences on how it's being thought about.
Right,
things
right,
like that.
Right.
And I guess this somewhat ties into an aspect of your project, the domain of one's own, where students will be having their own space, their own kind of web server that they can do with what they want, that they can take with them after they leave here. What's kind of the goal with that aspect of the project?
Well, the basic idea there is that we want graduate students to recognize the significance of generating and curating their own professional portfolio, and recognizing that that the internet plays an important role in people's initial sort of queries about who you are and what you've been up to. And if people get your application for a job, they glance at your CV, and they Google you, which they're most likely going to do, it's a pretty good idea to have not only something that you've put out there come up, but also something that you've put out there carefully, and something that's expressive of who you are, but also sort of representative of an awareness of the need to present oneself professionally in the broader sphere of the internet. And so another nice aspect, so the one side is recognizing that this is a feature of the way things work, and being somewhat forward thinking and active in sort of controlling and situating oneself. Another aspect is sort of the recognition that as a person's web presence is something that is going to be sort of a continuous presence over time, and that contains a kind of a narrative concerning their development, and that while it's very nice for institutions like Penn State and other places to provide web hosting for them while they're students, the limitation of that to the time that they're affiliated with the university brings with it some issues that we think will affect sort of how robustly they'll engage in the project from the start. If they know that they're going to lose this, or that they're going to have to transfer everything when they graduate, then we suspect that the chances are less likely that they'll put a lot of care and attention into developing it on the front end. So with the domain of one's own, Penn State picks up the bill while they're here, but then it's their domain, and so they can choose to continue with that domain afterwards. And it's again connected to the sense that, or another aspect of it, I could say, is really that that aspect of developing yourself and your professional presence is something that one has to do both in concert with, but also relatively independently of the institution that they happen to be developing, that they happen to be affiliated with at any given time. And so, while it may be good for a student to, say, be able to, submit something and have the department post it on the department web space, it could be equally or even more important that they be managing their own web space where they're able to speak in their own voice and to share things that they have an interest in sharing, but that the department itself may not necessarily have.